Just weeks after a string of other deaths involving doctors who also practiced alternative medicine.
I don't want to be part of this mass genocide that I see happening. And I think that what's going on right now will be remembered as the worst time in history.
They did everything in their powers to destroy your life.
Correct.
You were arrested?
Correct.
Didn't really feel comfortable sleeping in my house again because, of course, they could come in and disarm my alarm whenever.
How did I sit back and let this happen?
Brandy Vaughan was found dead.
At 3:45 in the morning, somebody entered in through the front door, the alarm went off.
Aluminum and formaldehyde, which causes cancer if you inhale it.
They're trying to scare the public. They're fear-mongering to create fear.
Why are we getting a vaccine that causes more deaths than the problem itself?
Someone opened my dining room window.
It's become normal to be sick.
That it's probably something to reduce the population or minimize reproduction rates.
Pharmaceutical companies are creating their future customers for their medications.
This doctor was found floating in a North Carolina river with a gunshot wound to the chest, just days after the FDA had raided his clinic. Official ruling: suicide. He'd been researching GC-MAF, a naturally occurring protein that many believed might be a breakthrough treatment for autism, cancer, and many other chronic diseases.
Dr. Bradstreet has been using our GC-MAF for 18 months. I think you've treated 900 children, is it now? Treated many adults with autism as well as chronic fatigue patients, cancer patients.
And his family insisted that he was not suicidal. Rather, they said he was optimistic and might have been on the verge of a major discovery that could have potentially helped millions worldwide. Yet the authorities said that he killed himself.
No, obviously we don't believe that. It goes against his entire life. There's nothing in his life that would ever back up the case of him wanting to commit suicide.
His name was Dr. Jeff Bradstreet, a physician and father who had devoted his career to helping children with autism. In June 2015, his office was raided by the authorities, and days later, he was found dead. However, Bradstreet wasn't the only one. In fact, around the same time, a disturbing number of alternative doctors died under very suspicious circumstances. And while there isn't much hard evidence which connects all of these cases, this cluster left a lot of people asking some very uncomfortable questions and wondering whether there was a much darker reality that was being covered up. One could say that Brandy Vaughan was one of those people. You see, Brandy was a former pharmaceutical sales rep for the company Merck. This is one of the largest drug manufacturers in the world, and she personally was involved in selling Vioxx.
Because I used to work for Merck, which is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies. And I worked for them. I sold a drug that killed people, thousands and thousands of people.
This is the infamous medication that this company knew increased the risk of heart attacks. It also had a host of other profound side effects, and yet this company aggressively pushed it anyway. And so when Brandy discovered this corruption, the buried data, and the blatant disregard for human health, she chose to walk away from a high-paying job and vowed to expose the dark truth of this industry.
Wow, what happened to our rights? How did I sit back and let this happen?
Refusing to stay silent, she founded Learn the Risk in 2015. This was a non-profit which was dedicated to exposing the potential dangers of vaccines and other pharmaceutical medications. She became one of the most prominent advocates for natural health in the whole of the USA. However, on December 7, 2020, she was tragically found deceased by a 10-year-old son. Of course, her death was ruled to be of natural causes, but was it really? You see, in the lead up to her death, Brandy shared numerous reports of stalking type behavior, house break-ins, and intimidation tactics.
At 3:45 in the morning, somebody entered in through the front door, the alarm went off. Someone opened my dining room window. Didn't really feel comfortable sleeping in my house again because, of course, they could come in and disarm my alarm whenever.
In fact, not long before she passed, Brandy left this chilling warning on her Facebook page. One of her last posts read like this: "I have never thought of taking my own life, not once. I have a huge mission. I would never take my own life. There have been many on this mission who've been killed. The darkness cannot win. I will never stop speaking out, even from the other side. In other words, she publicly warned us that if something happened to her, it was probably going to be foul play, and she knew exactly who it would likely be. So one of the most credible and articulate voices in the vaccine awareness movement, a former Merck insider with direct industry experience, suddenly drops dead at 44 years old, supposedly in perfect health at the time, just days before the first experimental mRNA shots were rolled out to the public. Now, the timing of this is a little bit of a coincidence, no? And the fact is, this wasn't the end of the silencing, because then came the full COVID era crackdown where the entire media ecosystem went into full panic mode. So if you're a doctor, a scientist, or even just a normal member of the general public who dared to question the official narrative, you faced brutal censorship, deplatforming, license threats, and coordinated attacks, especially if you had influence. And if you were one of the very unfortunate ones, you might have ended up dead under suspicious circumstances. Take Dr. Rashid Buttar, for example. He was a popular physician with a media presence who publicly challenged the COVID narrative. Just days after a heated CNN confrontation, this once healthy 57-year-old father died from mysterious circumstances. And shortly before his death, he is on record stating he believed he had been poisoned.
A few months I was in the ICU. I had been poisoned with the 200 times the amount of what's in the vaccinations.
And then there was German chemist Dr. Andreas Noack. He was one of Europe's top experts on an element called graphene. He was arrested live on stream in 2020, not long after releasing a video which proclaimed graphene oxide had been hidden in vaccines as a bioweapon. Shortly after, he was also found dead, apparently of a cardiac event. Or how about the case of a scientific researcher named Dr. Bing Liu? He was shot dead in a murder-suicide by a work colleague also in 2020. Coincidentally, this particular scientist was said to have been nearing major research findings on the potential origins of COVID-19. And just so you know, independent investigators who looked at that case at the time were able to spot many inconsistencies in that official story of his death. Now, these guys suspect that there may have been evidence of foul play and a potential cover-up. So I repeat, were these merely coincidences? Or are we witnessing a recurring pattern here? Pharmaceutical, or let's say medical industrial complex, don't just ignore critics. They actively intimidate, threaten, and attempt to destroy their credibility. And in the vast majority of cases, this doesn't necessarily mean death, right? No, it merely means that they will do all that they can to destroy your reputation by any means necessary. For example, look at what happened to Dr. Judy Mikovits.
So you made a discovery that conflicted with the agreed upon narrative.
Correct.
And for that, they did everything in their powers to destroy your life.
Correct.
A brilliant biochemist who had dedicated her career to honest research. She had her entire career destroyed and was ultimately blacklisted from academia. All this for simply speaking out on the potential dangers of vaccines, their relation to chronic fatigue syndrome, and then the corruption in the medical establishment. The same is true for cancer physician Dr. Stanislaw Burzynski. This doctor pioneered an alternative form of cancer treatment which was based on natural peptides called anti-neuroplastones. He'd been treating patients as early as the 1970s, and by many accounts, this was extremely effective.
I've had no chemotherapy. I've had no radiation. I chose Dr. Burzynski instead after a lot of research and a lot of searching.
It was not long after the FDA and the Texas Medical Board effectively waged war against his clinic. Over 75 indictments in the 1990s, clinic raids with armed agents. They were trying to strip his license, and they still are. So Burzynski himself reported personal death threats, break-ins, and even poison attempts. His crime? offering patients with terminal cancer an alternative treatment that they could afford and which could not be patented or mass marketed by Big Pharma. In other words, his work posed a genuine threat to their monopoly, and so he needed to be shut down. And this is an ancient history. The censorship and the professional attacks are still happening right now as we speak. Today, for example, look at Dr. William Mackis, a Canadian cancer physician and father. He's helped over 6,500 patients with remarkable results in sometimes terminal cancers. The results are backed by hundreds of real testimonials from real people. Yet he faces death threats, prosecution attempts, they're trying to take away his medical license, while his family has also been threatened. And what was his crime? He's getting results with cheap, unpatentable drugs, repurposed antiparasitics like ivermectin, mebendazole, and fenbendazole. Likewise, two of the most respected critical care physicians in the country, Dr. Pierre Corey, Dr. Paul Marik. These guys watched ivermectin save lives in the ICU during COVID. They co-founded the FLCCC and bravely published numerous protocols which actually worked for COVID. Of course, they were using cheap and repurposed drugs. And yet, for daring to put their patients' health first and challenge the official narrative, they were viciously and consistently attacked. This is despite a mountain of supporting clinical evidence and real-world results. Both doctors were stripped of their board certifications and effectively persecuted for threatening to step out of line, because their message threatened Big Pharma's stranglehold on medicine. Ultimately, early treatment with ivermectin would have undermined emergency use authorization and billions in revenue for the experimental mRNA shots. So they needed to shut that down. And now these are merely two high-profile examples among thousands of other doctors, scientists, researchers of various kinds who faced censorship, they faced defamation, they faced threats, they had their accounts stripped online, they had their voices silenced, essentially. It was, in many respects, a modern-day witch hunt. In fact, Dr. Corey himself is now written extensively on his own Substack page about many other doctors who experienced a similar form of persecution, and in some cases, death under very suspicious circumstances. This includes proponents of what were historically referred to as oxidative therapies. To quote Dr. Corey, oxidative therapies like chlorine dioxide and historical precursors such as glyoxolide and hormozone pose a massive threat to the $2 trillion biopharmaceutical industry due to their broad, potent, safe, and inexpensive efficacy against infections, cancer, inflammation, and degenerative diseases. Now, there are two cases that Dr. Corey mentions that I'm going to touch upon here. Dr. William Koch and Dr. Eugene Blass. Now, both of these died of the same month of the same year, December 1967. Koch was an MD PhD. He developed a treatment called glyoxolide. He was getting incredible results, curing advanced cancers in various different people and achieving massive success in livestock animals as well. Dr. Blass, on the other hand, another pioneer of sorts, created hormozone. Now, this was a magnesium peroxide type compound which also worked via the process of oxidation. Both treatments very similar, but their research was not connected in any real way. And both of them died under very suspicious circumstances. Koch was allegedly poisoned, and Blass was brutally murdered outside of his home. So we have two separate doctors working on revolutionary therapies which would go on to threaten what has now become a multi-billion-dollar monopoly on cancer treatment. Both murdered at basically the same time. Now, that's a little bit too much of a coincidence, in my opinion, just for me. And now this occurred over 50 years ago, but it would seem as though we can see the exact same pattern playing out today. So in today's world, Big Pharma is a multi-trillion-dollar industry whose entire business model depends on keeping people sick, not curing them. A Goldman Sachs analyst once asked the question, is curing patients a sustainable business model? And indeed, that one question tells you everything you need to know about the psychology and motive of the people that we're dealing with. keeping you sick and dependent on drugs is far more profitable for these people. In Dr. Corey's own words, the industry's criminality is also evident in the record of criminal fines that those in the industry routinely pay. This report by Public Citizen from 2018 found that from the years 1991 to 2017, the entire pharmaceutical industry's civil and criminal fines total $38.6 billion. The above comes out to $4 million paid out in fines every day for 25 years. So this is exactly why so many of these promising yet unpatentable treatments, so GC-MAF, the oxidative therapies, fenbendazole, ivermectin, the other antiparasitics, a bunch of other stuff, get attacked so aggressively in the media. It's also why so little funding is actually allocated toward research into these therapeutic nutrients or therapeutic natural substances. It's not that they don't work, and it's not a coincidence. It's just that these alternatives can never be profitable at scale for these kind of companies. So this system will desperately try to protect its empire at any and all cost. So if you're a critic, if you're an innovator, if you're a whistleblower, if you're a pioneer of some form of new therapy which actually works, you will at the very best be regulated to death. You will be critiqued. They will attack you in some way. And at worst, you may be found dead. You may be actually found dead under suspicious circumstances. So this pattern has repeated for decades, and that's basically what we're up against. It's a bit of a mess, really, but all I can ask you to do is stand up and try and speak the truth in your own life, in your own way, because darkness only wins when good people stay quiet. Ask the hard questions, think for yourself, seek real answers, seek the truth, basically. And let's not forget those brave souls who stood up for what's true and paid the ultimate price with their life. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.